Your Honor, I've been on the force 17 years. I can spot a dope pusher from a mile away. And this black woman right here, she's exactly that type. He jabbed a finger towards her from the witness stand, a smug little smile on his face. People like her come into our county, live off handouts, think the rules don't apply. Not while I'm working. The prosecutor gave a slow, approving nod. The jurors watched in stiff silence. The judge scribbled something in her legal pad. And at the defense table, the black woman in the county-issued jumpsuit, hands clasped, no lawyer she could afford, didn't say a word. Her name was Naomi Elise Carter. She didn't jerk, didn't break down. She just studied him, steady, like she was waiting for a cue. Sergeant Luke Carver believed he was burying another nobody, another poor black woman with no way to push back. He had no clue who she truly was, or that every false word spilling out of his mouth was about to blow up his career. Ever had someone with real power lie about you while the room treated their lies as truth? Let's rewind 3 months before that day in court. Millstone County, somewhere in the middle of America, population just under 60,000. Fields stretching in all directions, dotted with tiny towns, old churches, and endless straight roads where the speed rarely changes. From far away, it looked like one of those calendar pictures. The kind of place where neighbors still wave from porches, where Friday night football might as well be a holy service, where sheriff's deputies get invited to backyard cookouts every 4th of July. The kind of place where everyone just assumes the badge means good guy. But under that shiny surface, something had been rotting for years, quietly, the way mold spreads behind fresh paint. In the last 5 years alone, 23 formal complaints had been filed against deputies in the Millstone County Sheriff's Office. 23 residents, mostly black, mostly Latino, had walked through those glass doors, filled out forms, and said some version of the same thing. Something happened to me. Something wrong. Something illegal. 23 complaints. 23 so-called investigations handled in-house, and 23 times the department looked into itself and somehow discovered nothing at all. Every last complaint came back stamped with the same bold red word, unfounded. The names changed. The dates changed. The details barely did. A late-night stop on a lonely county road. An officer insisting he smelled weed. A search that no one ever really agreed to. Drugs found in a car. Arrest, conviction, prison. The pattern was so precise it felt rehearsed, like everyone had memorized their lines. And in a way, they had. Only nobody local seemed interested in asking why. Sheriff Randall Pike rubber-stamped each dismissed complaint without even bothering to skim them. Internal affairs, if you could call it that, was literally one guy. His young nephew, a rookie deputy whose biggest case had been tracking down a stolen bike. The system wasn't broken at all. It was doing exactly what it had been shaped to do, just not for the people it claimed to serve. Over 1,000 miles away, in a bland federal building most Americans never think about, someone else was paying attention. Inside the FBI's Civil Rights Division, analysts watch patterns the way meteorologists watch storm fronts. They track complaints, crunch arrest numbers, and flag counties where the math stops making sense. Places where certain groups get jailed at rates that can't be explained away. Millstone County had been blinking on their radar for nearly 2 years. Too many complaints, too many tossed aside, too many drug convictions in a rural county with no real major drug market. Something wasn't adding up. And they planned to find out why. In the spring of 2023, they made the call. They'd embed someone not with a visible badge, not with a squad, not with any official title anyone could see. Just one agent living like an ordinary resident, quietly documenting everything. On paper, the assignment sounded simple. Observe, record, build a federal case. In reality, it demanded something much harder. It required disappearing. It meant accepting whatever came. It meant waiting weeks, maybe months, for the perfect moment to move. They needed someone patient, someone disciplined, someone who understood in her bones what it meant to be black in a town that was never meant for you. They chose Naomi Elise Carter, 38 years old, 14-year veteran of the Bureau, a specialist in civil rights abuses and dirty policing. She'd worked undercover in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. She knew this story by heart. She understood what she'd be walking into. When they asked for volunteers, she didn't hesitate. Somebody has to be the one they finally pick on, she told her supervisor. Might as well be somebody who can actually do something about it. In June 2023, Naomi packed up and moved to Millstone County. She rented a small worn apartment on Maplewood Street, the section of town locals muttered about when they thought only each other could hear. The other side. She took a low-pay clerical job at a little insurance office off Main Street. She drove a 10-year-old silver sedan with a dinger rear bumper. No flashy jewelry, no expensive clothes. She kept to herself, offered polite smiles, never overshared. To anyone watching, she was just another black woman stretching every paycheck, tired but harmless. Nothing special, nothing for anyone in uniform to worry about. That was the point. Her apartment was staged with precision, framed family photos borrowed from the Bureau's props team, a faded couch, discount dishes, shoes by the door. On the fridge hung a child's drawing, thick crayon lines, sun too big, sky too blue. It hinted at a life. Single mom, tight on money, overwhelmed. The drawing actually belonged to her niece. Naomi had no children of her own. What she did have was a badge locked away, a mission in progress, and a recording device disguised as a simple pendant laying against her collarbone. Almost everything around her was part of the cover, and the cover so far was flawless. Meanwhile, Sergeant Luke Carver had no idea his carefully constructed world was about to splinter. 17 years with the department, commendations framed on his office wall, photos shaking hands with the mayor, the county administrator, and the sheriff. His brother-in-law, County Commissioner Martin Hale, had his fingers on half the local budget. In Millstone County, Luke Carver might as well have been bulletproof. Everyone knew it, including Luke. He strutted like a man who believed consequences were for other people. He bragged loudly about it too. In the break room over stale coffee, at the bar after shift, at his in-laws' Sunday dinners. He loved talking about cleaning up the streets, about protecting Millstone from the people changing the character of the community. His partner, Deputy Jenna Cole, heard it all. She'd been riding in his passenger seat for almost 3 years. She was younger, more careful with her words, the kind of person who paid attention even when she pretended not to. Jenna noticed things that made her skin crawl. The way Luke decided who to tail before even flipping on his lights. The way evidence always turned up right when his case needed it. The way his body camera mysteriously glitched at just the right moments. Still, she didn't speak up. 2 kids at home, a mortgage barely manageable, and a partner tied to a powerful county commissioner. That was a combination that kept her quiet. She told herself she was just doing her job. When he cracked so-called jokes she found disgusting, she stared at the floor. When he said things that knotted her stomach, she swallowed it down. She repeated a quiet script in her head. It's not my fight. I didn't really see that. But deep down, beneath all the self-protection and excuses, Jenna Cole knew something was badly wrong. She just hadn't found the courage to say it out loud. Not yet. September 14th, 2023. The date everything shifted. The evening began like 100 others. The sun dropped low over Millstone County, painting the fields in orange and pink streaks. The air had cooled into the low 70s. A light breeze pushed through the rows of corn along County Road 9. Naomi Carter was driving home from work. Same route as always. Same beat-up sedan. Same measured attention to every posted sign. The limit was 45. Her speedometer hovered at 42. Seatbelt buckled, headlights on. Both hands settled at 10 and 2. Registration current. No bench warrants. No criminal record. Nothing that should have made her stand out. Just a black woman on a back road, heading home as dusk rolled in. She spotted the patrol cruiser in her rearview mirror before she heard anything. It sat tucked into a gravel pull-off, half hidden by a thin line of trees. It was the kind of spot deputies used to watch for speeders or for other things. The cruiser pulled out, sliding in behind her, keeping its distance at first. No lights, no siren. Naomi stayed steady at 42. She'd been waiting for this moment for 3 months, not wishing for it, just respecting the odds. She knew black drivers in Millstone County were stopped 4 times more often than white drivers. She knew Carver's patrol grid included this exact stretch of road. Sooner or later, he would pull her over. She just didn't know it'd be tonight. Blue and red suddenly splashed across her rear window. The siren chirped once, sharp and brief. Naomi flicked on her blinker, checked her mirrors, and eased onto the shoulder, bringing the car to a careful stop. She shifted into park and placed both hands on top of the steering wheel. Fingers spread. Her pulse sped up, not from fear but from focus. 3 months of setup narrowed down to this single traffic stop. The pendant at her neck was already capturing everything. Gravel crunched as someone approached. A harsh beam of light cut through the back glass, bouncing into her eyes. Sergeant Luke Carver appeared at the driver's side, silhouette framed in strobes. He didn't introduce himself or give a reason for the stop. He just stood there, flashlight aimed at her face like an interrogation lamp. License and registration. Good evening, officer. Her tone was even, polite, measured. Could you tell me why you pulled me over? License and registration, he repeated, voice flat, making it clear questions weren't on the menu. Yes, sir. I'm going to reach for my purse now. It's on the passenger seat. I'll move slowly. She retrieved her wallet and registration, slid them out, and passed them through the window. Carver took them without so much as a nod. He glanced at the license, then at her, then back at the card. Something in his expression shifted, like mental gears sliding into place. Naomi Elise Carter, he read, dragging out her name. Maplewood Street. That's the government housing side of town, right? It's just an apartment, sir. Just an apartment, he echoed with a dry, mocking chuckle. Step out of the vehicle. May I ask why, officer? I don't believe I was speeding. I'm smelling marijuana coming from your car. Naomi had never smoked weed in her life. She'd never touched any illegal substance. There was nothing in that car. There never had been. But she knew exactly what was unfolding. This was the script. The same script that had played out for those 23 other people. The same lie that had pushed innocent residents into prison cells. And now it was her turn in the scene. "I don't use any drugs, sir. You won't find anything in my vehicle." "Step out of the car, now! Don't make me repeat myself!" She unbuckled, opened the door slowly, and stepped onto the shoulder, keeping her hands visible. Fading daylight and flashing lights turned the road into something unreal, like a set in a bad procedural drama. Carver circled her sedan like a predator pacing around something trapped. "You're real calm," he noted. "Most folks get nervous, but you're calm. Why's that?" "I don't have anything to hide, officer." "Nothing to hide," he repeated. "That's what they all say." He jerked his chin towards the car. "You won't mind if I look around then? Am I required to consent to a search?" For a second, annoyance flickered across his face. Most people didn't know their rights, and if they did, fear usually kept them quiet. "I don't need your consent. Probable cause. I smelled marijuana. That gives me every right to search." There was no smell. They both knew it. But that didn't matter. Out here on County Road 9, with nothing but fields for witnesses, Sergeant Carver's word might as well have been carved in stone. He didn't wait for her answer. He yanked open the driver's door and started ripping through the car. Glove box, center console, under the seats. He flung papers onto the shoulder, dumped out her purse, scattered her belongings like they were trash, because to him, they were. A second cruiser rolled up, its tires grinding gravel. Deputy Jenna Cole climbed out, walking over with measured steps, hanging back near the rear bumper. Naomi caught Jenna's gaze. Jenna immediately looked away. "What have we got?" Jenna asked. "Smell of weed," Carver said, still rummaging. "She's pretending she doesn't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, but there's something here. I can feel it." He reached under the passenger seat. His hand moved in a way that felt rehearsed, too smooth, too sure, like someone repeating a trick performed 100 times. When his hand came back into view, he was holding a small plastic bag with white powder sealed inside. "Well, well, well," he said, letting the flashlight catch it so it gleamed. "Look at this." Naomi felt her stomach clench. Not from shock. She'd predicted something like this from the beginning. But watching him actually plant the evidence right in front of her face was different. It was uglier in real time. "That's not mine," she said. "Oh, it's not yours?" His voice dripped fake surprise. "Then how did it end up under your seat?" "I don't know. I've never seen that bag in my life." "That's what they all say, sweetheart." He stepped closer, dangled the bag inches from her eyes. "Cocaine possession with intent to distribute. That's a felony. You're staring down years behind bars." He was savoring this. She could see the way his eyes lit up with control. "How's it feel?" he asked quietly. "You come into my county, living off government checks, thinking you can do whatever you want. This isn't Chicago. This isn't Detroit. This is Millstone County. Out here, I am the law." Naomi kept her face neutral. "Nothing to say now?" he prodded. "Where'd that calm attitude go?" "I'd like to invoke my right to remain silent," she said. "You'll get plenty of silent time in a cell." He clamped a hand around her arm and spun her around. His grip was rough, driving her against the side of the car hard enough to rattle it. "Hands behind your back! You're hurting me. Should have thought about that before you decided to run product through my roads." The cuffs snapped shut, too tight, metal biting into skin. He pivoted her around again so she faced him. "You have the right to remain silent," he recited, sounding bored, like he'd repeated it too many times to care. Anything you say can and will be used against you. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one, the court will give you one. He delivered the lines like they were punchlines, not protections. For people like the version of Naomi he believed he'd caught, those rights usually meant very little. As he steered her towards his cruiser, Naomi looked once more at Jenna Cole. Their eyes met. Jenna's jaw was tight, her shoulders drawn up. Her hands were balled into fists at her sides. Jenna had noticed something. Naomi was sure of it. She'd seen the way Carver's hand went to his pocket before he reached under the seat. But Jenna turned away, heading back toward her own car, saying nothing, doing nothing. Carver yanked open the back door of his cruiser and pushed Naomi inside, not gentle about it. "You know what your problem is?" he asked, leaning in, his face close enough that she could smell stale coffee and chew. "People like you think you can roll in here, collect government money, break the law, and just walk away. I've been doing this job 17 years. I know exactly what I'm looking at." He slammed the door. Through the glass, Naomi watched him stroll back to her car, notepad in hand, already sketching out whatever story he planned to tell. Erratic driving, strong odor of marijuana. Suspect became agitated and uncooperative. Drugs discovered in plain sight. None of it true. All of it official. In Millstone County, that report would be treated like scripture. But this time, Carver had made a mistake he couldn't imagine. 6 hours before that stop, Naomi's car had been swept by an FBI tech team. Standard protocol before any undercover operation involving surveillance. They'd gone over every inch with equipment sensitive enough to pick up residue at the molecular level. The sedan was spotless. No cocaine, no marijuana, nothing. Certified, signed, logged. If there were drugs in her car now, they weren't hers. They were his, and he'd just planted them on 2 cameras. The pendant against her skin captured every word, every movement, every lie. A hidden lens nestled inside her rearview mirror caught the scene from another angle. At that exact second, in a secure room at Quantico, analysts were watching the feed in real time. They'd seen Carver's hand dip into his pocket. They'd seen him stash the bag. They'd seen everything. Sergeant Carver thought he'd just scored another easy collar. Instead, he'd given the Bureau the case they'd been waiting for. But Naomi wasn't ready to drop the mask. Not yet. She needed one more piece. She needed him to repeat these lies under oath, in a courtroom, on the record, with the full weight of the county behind him. That was when the trap would fully spring. So she sat in the back of the cruiser, wrists stinging, and watched the dark fields roll by. She waited. The next 4 hours blurred together. Harsh fluorescent lights, metal doors, clanking keys, forms shoved across counters. Naomi Carter moved through the Millstone County justice machine the same way thousands before her had. They inked her fingers, snapped her mugshot, stripped away her personal items, dropping them into a clear plastic bag, phone, wallet, keys, the pendant containing the evidence that could wreck a veteran deputy's career. To the booking officer, it was just another piece of cheap jewelry. Nobody gave it a second look. Nobody questioned why she clutched it a second too long before handing it over. They issued her an orange jumpsuit and walked her down a hallway that echoed with voices, doors, and distant shouting. The holding cell had a concrete floor that seemed to hold cold, like a memory. The toilet sat openly in the corner with no partition, no pretense of privacy. Several women glanced up when she stepped inside, then quickly went back to their own thoughts. To them, she was just another intake, another face in an endless line of people wearing county colors. That night, Naomi got one phone call. She didn't dial an attorney. She didn't call relatives. Instead, she punched in a DC number that rang in a secure office at FBI headquarters. When someone picked up, she spoke only 2 words: "Package received." Then she hung up. No explanation, no details, just the phrase that meant everything to the people on the other end. Inside bureau language, "package received" signaled that the operation had reached its critical tipping point. The evidence was captured. The target had committed the expected violation. The net was in position. Now came the most exhausting part of any long undercover job, waiting for bureaucracy to catch up. 3 days after her arrest, Naomi stood shackled before Judge Linda Marquez for her arraignment. The courtroom was half empty, more echo than people. Just another drug case on a crowded docket. No cameras, no activists, no family sitting behind her. Just routine, just process. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Ryan Keller, late 30s, expensive haircut, and big political dreams, moved toward the bench like he owned the flooring. His conviction rate hovered around 96%, and he loved mentioning it. "Your Honor, the state requests bail be set at $50,000, he said smoothly. Naomi didn't react. She'd known they'd ask high. She'd read the playbook they ran on people like her. 50,000 for a single bag of what's alleged to be cocaine, he continued. The defendant is new to Millstone County, has minimal ties to the area, no family locally, no property, and only short-term employment. The risk of flight is significant." Naomi stood there in her jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front, eyes forward. Judge Marquez didn't bother lifting her gaze for long. "Bail is set at $50,000, she said briskly. "Next matter." The gavel never even tapped. Naomi could have made bail. The Bureau had contingency funds for exactly this kind of scenario. But that wasn't the plan. She needed to stay inside their system. She had to keep wearing the label they'd slapped on her: defendant, suspected dealer, nobody. She needed Carver to feel completely confident, arrogant enough to take the stand and retell every lie without hesitation. So she didn't post bond. She was remanded to county custody and moved from holding to the women's wing. There, she settled into the rhythm of the detention center. Counts, meal times, noise, and the constant low hum of frustration and despair. She waited. A public defender was assigned, Marcus Hill, 46, thinning hair, lines deepening around his eyes, the kind of man who always looked like he'd missed sleep. He juggled more cases than anyone should, and the strain showed. He had 15 minutes to skim Naomi's folder before stepping into the interview room across from her. They sat at a metal table under buzzing lights, plastic chairs scraping the floor. Marcus flipped through pages quickly, eyes scanning more than reading. "Miss Carter, I'll be straight with you," he said, voice tired but not unkind. "Sergeant Carver's word carries a lot of weight around here. 17 years on the job. Juries trust him. Judges trust him. Without something concrete to challenge his version, if this goes to trial, the odds aren't great." Naomi watched him carefully. "What if there was proof?" she asked. Marcus stopped at mid-page. Something in the way she said it, calm, almost certain, made him look up. "You have something?" "Not yet," she replied. And of course he couldn't understand what that meant. Not then. He wouldn't. Not until the morning of trial, when a flash drive and a sealed FBI credential showed up on his desk with precise instructions that would flip every assumption on its head. For now, he just nodded, scribbled a note, and moved on. Outside those cinder block walls, Millstone County rolled on, unchanged, like Naomi's arrest had never happened. Sergeant Carver was back in his patrol car the following day. Same roads, same swagger. He made 2 more traffic stops that week, both black drivers on quiet stretches of highway. 2 more complaints drifted into the sheriff's office and got tossed into the same loop. Sheriff Pike authorized Carver's reports without a second glance. He'd been signing off on them for 17 years. Carver produced numbers. He put people in cuffs. He helped keep the county's conviction stats high. Why would Pike start questioning him now? Commissioner Martin Hale heard about Naomi's case over barbecue and beer at a family cookout. He clapped Carver on the back and laughed. "Luke's out there doing what we pay him to do. Clean up our streets," he said. Nobody challenged him. Nobody asked what our streets meant or who counted as ours. The system was humming exactly as designed. But one person in Millstone County couldn't stop replaying that night. Deputy Jenna Cole. Every evening that week, she lay awake, eyes tracking cracks in the ceiling, her mind stuck on the traffic stop on County Road 9. She kept seeing the way Carver moved around the car, the intensity with which he tore through Naomi's belongings, that split-second hand motion before he reached under the seat, the smoothness of it like muscle memory, and Naomi's expression, steady, nearly unreadable, not what Jenna expected. Jenna's body cam had malfunctioned during the stop. Carver had told her to shut it off, muttering something about no need for all that tonight. It was his usual move before doing something he didn't want recorded. But Jenna's dash cam had kept running. On the 4th night, with her kids asleep and the house quiet, she opened the footage on her personal laptop. She watched once, then again, then a 3rd time, inching through frame by frame, and there it was, plain as day if you knew to look. Carver's right hand dipping into his own pocket before he leaned into Naomi's car. A quick, practiced motion, too intentional to be chance. He hadn't found the drugs. He'd brought them. Jenna sat alone in her living room, the laptop's glow carving out a little blue island in the dark, and felt the ground under her beliefs shift. She couldn't unsee it. She couldn't pretend anymore that she didn't know what he'd done. Now she had proof. And she had absolutely no idea what to do with it. She thought about her children, sleeping down the hall, about the mortgage payment due next week, about what would happen to her her reputation, her safety, if she accused a 17-year veteran, married into county power, of planting evidence on a black woman from the wrong side of town. The calculation was brutal. She could almost hear her career collapsing before she even spoke a word. So Jenna chose something she would regret for the rest of her life. She deleted the file from her laptop. One click. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Gone. But she didn't erase the cloud back up. Some small part of her, fearful, ashamed, clinging, couldn't bring herself to destroy it completely. She told herself it didn't matter. No one would ever dig that deep. No one would ever look for it. She was wrong. That oversight would come back to haunt her. October 23, 2023. The State of versus Naomi Elise Carter. Trial day. The courtroom felt quiet that morning, almost sleepy. It was the kind of case that didn't draw crowds. A black woman accused of dealing, 1 bag of powder, a veteran cop as the star witness. Routine. A couple of local reporters sat in the back with notepads. more out of habit than curiosity. The gallery benches were mostly empty, dust motes floating in the shafts of light. This was just another drug trial in a county that processed more than its fair share. No church groups, no civil rights organizations, no family lined up behind Naomi, just the usual players: judge, prosecutor, public defender, bailiff, clerk. Business as usual. The kind of day justice systems are built on: ordinary, forgettable, dangerous, precisely because of how normal it all feels. On the docket, her case was one of many, sandwiched between a probation violation and a burglary plea. Sergeant Luke Carver arrived early, like always. He pushed through the courthouse doors with the easy confidence of someone who'd testified more times than he could count and never once been seriously challenged. He shook hands with the bailiff, cracked a joke that made the clerk chuckle, traded a few quiet words with Ada Keller. Sheriff Pike had come too, planting himself in the second row as a show of support. "This'll be quick," Carver murmured. "Open and shut." Pike nodded. "Just like the others," the sheriff replied. And there it was in plain language, an admission that this wasn't the first time, that this case fit a well-worn template. 23 complaints, 23 dismissals, dozens of convictions built on the same pattern of stops, searches, and conveniently discovered drugs. Carver had never lost one. He settled into the front row, uniform pressed, boots shined, every inch the reliable lawman the county believed he was. He waited for his name to be called. Naomi came in through the side door, escorted by a deputy, shackled at the wrists and ankles, orange jumpsuit hanging loosely from her frame. The chains rattled faintly with each step. She kept her chin level, her eyes forward. No tears, no trembling. Her face gave almost nothing away, no anger, no panic, just this quiet, contained focus. To anyone watching, she looked like resignation. To the people who truly knew her, it would have looked more like the stillness before impact. She took her seat beside Marcus Hill at the defense table. He leaned in and whispered something, probably about keeping calm, about trusting the process as much as anyone in her position reasonably could. Naomi nodded once. Across the room, Carver watched her like a hunter watching a deer walk into the clearing. He'd done this dance for years. He trusted the script. Cop testifies, prosecutor leads, defense scrambles, jury believes the badge. He had no idea the script had already been rewritten. The court clerk called the case. "All rise." Everyone stood as Judge Marquez stepped through the side door and took the bench, black robes settling around her as she sat. She glanced over the file briefly before looking out across the courtroom. To her, it was one more matter on a crowded calendar. To Naomi, it was the moment months of planning had been building toward. The bailiff called for everyone to be seated. The room quieted, waiting for the first witness. Opening statements came and went, familiar lines in a familiar show. Keller talked about protecting the community from dangerous narcotics. Marcus spoke about presumption of innocence and reasonable doubt. Jurors nodded, some serious, some bored. Outside, the town moved through its Tuesday as if nothing at all unusual was happening. Inside, with every word, the gap between what Millstone County believed about itself and what was about to be exposed grew a little wider, stretched a little tighter, ready to snap. Carver straightened his uniform as the prosecutor finally called him to the stand. He walked up with a practiced, steady stride and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The jurors watched him like he was exactly what he appeared to be, a seasoned officer dedicated to keeping them safe. The judge picked up her pen. The court reporter's fingers hovered above her keys. Naomi sat at the defense table, hands folded, eyes on him, waiting. Her face betrayed nothing. No hint that she was anything other than the woman he'd painted her to be. Not the undercover federal agent who'd spent months living as a target. Not the person whose hidden cameras and silent witnesses in Quantico had captured every lie he was about to repeat under oath. To everyone else, she was just the defendant in orange, another poor black woman about to be convicted. To Naomi, this was the moment the trap finally began to close. That same steady, unreadable calm sat on Naomi's face. The same look she'd worn since the night blue lights filled her rearview mirror. She lowered herself into the chair at the defense table beside Marcus Hill, who was arranging his files with unusual precision. Something was different about him. His shoulders were squared, hands steady, eyes sharp. Nobody noticed. Every gaze in the room was fixed on the veteran sergeant about to swear in. The people call Sergeant Luke Carver. Carver rose, tugged his uniform straight, and walked to the witness stand with the relaxed swagger of someone who'd done this dozens of times and always walked out clean. He lifted his right hand, set his left on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" the clerk asked. "I do," he replied, settling into the chair like it was his throne. The prosecutor approached. "Sergeant Carver, please describe for the jury what happened on September 14th, 2023. Carver nodded, leaned toward the microphone. "That evening I was on routine patrol along County Road 9 when I saw a silver sedan weaving. The vehicle kept drifting over the center line." Lie number 1. Naomi had been rock steady at 42 in a 45. "I initiated a traffic stop and went to speak with the driver," he said, voice smooth as polished stone. "As soon as I reached the window," Carver continued, "I immediately noticed a strong, unmistakable odor of marijuana pouring out of the vehicle." Lie number 2. There had never been so much as a trace of weed anywhere near Naomi's car. "I asked the driver, Ms. Carter, to step out. She quickly became combative and resistant, refusing lawful commands." Lie number 3. Naomi had said, "Yes, sir," and "No, sir," her voice even from start to finish. Given the smell and her aggressive behavior, Carver said, "I decided to search the car. Under the passenger seat, in plain sight, I located a clear plastic bag with a white powdery substance inside. A field test indicated it was cocaine." Lie number 4. He'd slipped that bag under the seat himself, and nothing under a seat is in plain view. The prosecutor nodded approvingly, like hearing a familiar song. "In your professional opinion, based on 17 years' experience, what did her behavior tell you?" Carver turned his head and looked straight at Naomi, that same smug grin from the roadside creeping back. "In my experience, she knew exactly what was in that car," he said. "I've been doing this a long time. I recognize the type." The type. He tossed out the phrase like it was self-explanatory, like being a black woman driving alone on a country road was evidence in itself. "No further questions," the prosecutor said. "Your witness, Mr. Hill." Marcus Hill rose deliberately. He picked up a neat folder from the table and walked toward the witness stand. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted almost imperceptibly, like the pressure before a storm. Marcus moved with a crisp certainty that hadn't shown during openings. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly. "Sergeant Carver, You testified that your body camera malfunctioned during this stop, correct? That's right, Carver said. Equipment failure. Understood, Marcus replied softly. Let's talk about those failures. Marcus flipped open the folder. According to your department's own logs, this wasn't the first time. Over the last 18 months, your body camera has failed 12 separate times, all during traffic stops. He looked up. 12 stops, 12 malfunctions. That's accurate? Carver's jaw clenched slightly. I don't control when the hardware goes down, he said. Marcus nodded. Sure. One more thing. Those 12 stops? 11 ended in drug arrests. 11 involved Black or Latino drivers. All 11 filed complaints, later dismissed. He let the words hang. Another coincidence? Objection, the prosecutor snapped. Relevance. Judge Linda Marquez studied Marcus for a moment, then nodded. Overruled. I'll allow it. The witness will answer. Carver shifted, his confidence dipping. I work high-crime corridors, he said stiffly. That's where the drugs are. Marcus tilted his head slightly. High crime, you say, he murmured. Interesting choice of words. He picked up a stapled packet. Because county crime data paints a different picture of that particular stretch of County Road 9. He laid the document on the evidence table. According to Millstone County's own statistics, the area where you stopped Ms. Carter has one of the lowest drug-related crime rates in the county. He paused, letting that sink in. But let's set that aside for the moment. Marcus walked back to the defense table, retrieved another slim folder, and returned to the stand. Sergeant, you told this court no recording exists of that stop because your camera malfunctioned. That's your sworn testimony? That's correct, Carver answered, some swagger returning. No video. Nothing to see. Marcus glanced at Naomi. She gave him the barest nod, almost nothing, but enough. Then I'm curious, Marcus said, how you'd explain this. He produced a small flash drive, holding it up. Your Honor, the defense moves to introduce video evidence captured from my client's personal recording device. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Carver went rigid. What recording device? He blurted. There was no... What are you talking about? A screen descended at the front of the courtroom, humming softly. The lights dimmed slightly. The video flickered to life. Crisp picture, clean sound. The entire traffic stop unfolded in high definition, starting from the moment Carver's cruiser slid into Naomi's rear view. No fuzz, no glitches, no convenient blackout. The room went still. They heard Carver's voice, license and registration. They heard Naomi respond, respectful, calm. Good evening, officer. May I ask why I was stopped? Every word pierced the silence. They heard him insist he smelled marijuana where none existed. They heard the condescension when he called her sweetheart. The venom when he said, you people. The way he talked about the county like he owned it. They watched him tear through the car, tossing papers and personal items onto the shoulder. Then the moment arrived on screen, frozen for anyone who cared to see. Carver's hand dipped into his own pocket, pulled something out, then reached under the passenger seat and discovered the bag. He had planted the drugs, step by step, on camera. The gallery erupted, sharp gasps, whispered curses. One reporter's pen rolled off the bench and clattered to the floor. The prosecutor's face drained of color. Sheriff Pike half stood, then fell back into his seat like someone had cut his strings. That video is fake, Carver stammered, hand gripping the arms of the witness chair. Edited. That's doctored. It's not real. But the tiny, precise movements on screen told a different story. Every frame matched the audio, every angle consistent. The timing was exact. He reached into his pocket before anything appeared under that seat. No jump cuts, no glitches, no way to explain it as anything but what it was. Marcus stepped toward the bench with a sealed envelope. "Your Honor," he said, "I have one additional piece of evidence for the court's review." He handed it up. Judge Marquez slid it open, scanned the document, then read more carefully. Her eyebrows climbed. "Mr. Hill," she said slowly, "are you representing this as authentic?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus replied. The prosecutor shot to his feet. "Your Honor, what is that document? We haven't seen—" "You will," Judge Marquez said sharply. She turned back to Marcus. "Explain." Marcus pivoted toward the room so the jury and gallery could see his face. "Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves for immediate dismissal of all charges against Ms. Carter." "On what basis?" the judge asked. "On the basis," Marcus said, "that the woman sitting beside me is not the person the state believes she is." He walked back to the defense table and stood next to Naomi. "My client is not simply Naomi Carter, insurance clerk from Maplewood Street. My client is Special Agent Naomi Elise Carter, 14-year veteran of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division." For a heartbeat, the courtroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pen cap click. "She was deployed to Millstone County to investigate ongoing civil rights violations," Marcus continued, "including fabricated evidence, wrongful arrests, and racially targeted policing by members of the sheriff's office." He gestured toward Carver. "For the last 7 months, Sergeant Carver has been the primary subject of that investigation." The room ruptured. Reporters grabbed their phones. The gallery buzzed with disbelief. Sheriff Pike's complexion shifted from furious red to a ghostly white. The prosecutor looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. "The narcotics Sergeant Carver claims to have found in her vehicle were planted," Marcus said, voice ringing. "We have video of him doing exactly that. Additionally, her car was thoroughly swept by FBI forensic technicians 6 hours before the stop. It was chemically verified to be clean. No drugs, no residue." He paused, letting the truth land. "Sergeant Carver didn't take a dealer off the street that night, Your Honor. He arrested the federal agent assigned to expose him." On the stand, Carver shook his head over and over, whispering "no" like a prayer that wasn't going to be answered. Naomi rose for the first time since the hearing began. She turned fully toward him. Her expression hadn't changed. Still composed, still patient, but now he finally understood that look. She hadn't been scared. She'd been waiting, studying, giving him every inch of rope he needed to hang himself. "Motion to dismiss is granted," Judge Marquez said, gavel cracking like thunder. "All charges against Special Agent Carter are hereby dropped," she announced. "Sergeant Carver, you are immediately suspended from duty pending further investigation. You will surrender your badge and service weapon to the bailiff right now. This matter is referred to federal authorities and to an external internal affairs review." The room exploded into motion, voices overlapping, phones ringing, reporters dashing for the doors. Naomi didn't rush. She walked calmly toward a side exit where 2 figures in navy jackets waited. One of them, Special Agent in Charge Angela Torres, handed Naomi a dark jacket. Naomi slipped it on. Across the back, 3 yellow letters screamed against the fabric, FBI. She had entered the courthouse in orange, shackled and accused. She walked out in bureau blue, free and fully herself again. The next 72 hours would be the longest of Luke Carver's life. For the first time in years, he wasn't the one in control. Within 3 hours of the bombshell in court, black SUVs and sedans bearing federal plates lined the lot outside the Millstone County Sheriff's Office. Agents in windbreakers pushed through the main doors with a signed federal search warrant from a judge in Washington, D.C. They weren't there to ask nicely. "This is my department," Sheriff Randall Pike barked, trying to block the entrance. "You can't just storm in like this." "Actually, Sheriff, we can," Torres replied, holding up the warrant. "Federal investigation into civil rights violations, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy and obstruction," she said. "Your cooperation will be noted. It is not necessary." Pike's face blanched, then flushed, then settled into a sickly gray. He stepped aside. The agents swept through the building like a cold front. Carver's desk was emptied. His locker popped open and cataloged. His computer was powered down and carried off. Paper files disappeared into labeled boxes, sealed and stacked for transport. Every report he'd written, every piece of physical evidence he'd handled in the last 5 years was tagged and moved. The framed Deputy of the Year photo came down from the wall and slipped into an evidence sleeve. Commendations were photographed, documented as artifacts of a culture that rewarded numbers over justice. By closing time, the sheriff's office looked ransacked. Carver, stripped of his gun and badge, sat alone in a windowless interview room, staring at cinder block walls that wouldn't answer back. His first call had gone to Commissioner Martin Hale, his brother-in-law, the man who always had a favor to trade. Hale promised to talk to some people, to calm things down. But suddenly, no one was picking up the phone. The Attorney General's office was unavailable. The governor's staff was in meetings. Old drinking buddies who once owed him everything now claimed not to remember. When the feds show up, local power games stop mattering. Influence evaporates. People forget your name. At the FBI field office, the real work was just starting. Analysts spread out Carver's entire career across tables and screens. Every traffic stop, every arrest, every conviction he'd touched went under the microscope. The pattern that emerged was brutal. Over 5 years, he'd racked up 89 drug-related arrests. 71 of those involved Black or Latino drivers, almost 80%, in a county where those communities made up less than 15% of the population. That wasn't chance. That was targeting. His conviction rate hovered around 94%, staggeringly high. On paper, he looked like a star. But when analysts focused on cases where defendants had independent video, cell phone recordings, security footage, dash cams, a different pattern appeared. In 6 such cases, 5 were dismissed once video surfaced. Carver only stayed unbeatable when nobody else had a camera rolling. As the data piled up, investigators started dialing numbers, tracking down people who'd been insisting for years that they were framed. The stories that poured in were almost interchangeable. He said he smelled weed. "I've never smoked a day in my life." He wrote that I was yelling and aggressive. I kept my hands on the wheel and answered, "Yes, sir," "No, sir." He reached under my seat and pulled out a bag. I swear it wasn't mine. Then came the aftermath. I lost my job. I couldn't pass background checks. I spent 14 months locked up over drugs that weren't mine. I went to prison, one woman said quietly. When I came back, my kids were gone. Foster care. My ex got full custody. I see them maybe twice a year now. One by one, the people Carver had steamrolled finally had someone really listening. For years, their complaints had been stamped away. Appeals denied, lives detoured or destroyed. Now their voices weren't bouncing off a locked door. But the Bureau needed more than survivor accounts. They needed someone who'd stood beside Carver in uniform. They needed Deputy Jenna Cole. She was summoned on the third day. Agent Torres met her in a small bare interview room that could have been anywhere in America. A recorder sat between them like a third person. "Deputy Cole, appreciate you coming in," Torres said. Jenna's hands shook as she folded them. Dark circles pooled under her eyes. "Do I need an attorney?" she asked. "That depends on how honest you are with me," Torres replied. She opened a thin file. "You were present at the traffic stop involving Special Agent Carter on September 14th, Torres said. "Your body cam is logged as corrupted. Your patrol car's dash footage was erased from the department system." Torres slid a glossy photo across the table, a still frame pulled from the recovered cloud backup. "But you didn't delete it everywhere." Jenna's face went pale. In the image, Carver's hand froze mid-motion, reaching into his pocket. "We reconstructed the video you tried to hide, Deputy," Torres said quietly. "We watched it frame by frame. You saw this happen. You saw him plant evidence." The room felt smaller. "I have 2 kids," Jenna whispered. "A mortgage. Luke's connected. His brother-in-law practically runs the county budget. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to uphold the law," Torres answered. "You swore an oath to protect people." "I know," Jenna choked out, tears spilling. "I know I failed." Torres's voice stayed steady. "How many times did you see something like this? How many times did you watch him plant evidence, twist reports, single people out because of how they look?" Jenna shut her eyes, shoulders shaking. "I've lost count," she said finally. 5 times, maybe 6, maybe more. He'd tell me to switch off my camera. He'd say, "Watch how this is done." And I watched. She swallowed hard. I told myself it wasn't my business, that it was too late to change anything. But I knew. "You still have a choice," Torres said. "Tell us everything and there's a path forward," Torres continued. "Refuse, and we're talking about accessory charges, obstruction, conspiracy. You'll lose your badge, and you might spend time behind bars yourself." Jenna stared at the recorder, seeing every decision she dodged stack up in front of her. Then she nodded, once. Over the next 3 hours, she poured out everything, voice cracking, but relentless. Every manipulated malfunction, every time she'd watched him steer a narrative in a report, every complaint brushed aside. She described the way Sheriff Pike treated citizen complaints like paperwork clutter. How internal affairs, just Pike's nephew, acted more like a shield than an investigator. How the unspoken rule was simple. If the person complaining was Black or Latino, the assumption was they were lying. She talked about other deputies too, the ones who rolled their eyes but said nothing. The ones who shrugged and called it just how it is. The ones who quietly benefited from the same rotten system. When she finally ran out of words, Torres clicked off the recorder. "You did the right thing today," she said. "It doesn't erase what happened, and it should have come sooner. But it's something." Jenna wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. "Will it matter?" she whispered. Torres thought about that for a moment. "I can't promise you outcomes," she said, "but I can promise none of this changes without people like you finally telling the truth." 2 days later, Sheriff Randall Pike stood at a podium outside his own building, cameras and microphones forming a small forest in front of him. The Millstone County Sheriff's Office takes these allegations extremely seriously, he read stiffly from prepared notes. Sergeant Carver has been relieved of duty pending a full and fair investigation. Our department is committed to the highest professional standards. A reporter from the state capitol cut in. Sheriff, your signature appears on 23 dismissed complaints against Carver over 5 years. How do you claim ignorance of his conduct? She pressed. Pike's jaw tightened. I relied on internal affairs, he said. I trusted their conclusions. Your internal affairs, the reporter said, consisted of your nephew, who has no investigative background and who never sustained a single complaint against any deputy. Is that the highest standard you just mentioned? Pike's mouth opened, then shut. No spin sounded believable. The press conference wrapped up awkwardly. It would be the last time he stood at that podium as sheriff. On November 15, 2023, officials from the U.S. Department of Justice stepped up to a very different podium, this one in Washington, D.C. Today, the spokesperson announced, we are filing federal criminal charges against former Millstone County Sheriff Sergeant Luke Daniel Carver. Cameras flashed. Reporters raised pens. The spokesperson read the counts. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law, for using his position to target citizens based on race. Perjury, for lying under oath in multiple proceedings. Obstruction of justice, the official continued, for manipulating evidence and interfering with investigations. And evidence tampering, for planting narcotics in vehicles and arresting innocent individuals for crimes they did not commit. Combined, the charges carried a potential sentence of up to 30 years in federal prison. DOJ also announced a sweeping consent decree with Millstone County, an enforceable agreement that would force the sheriff's office to change or risk further sanctions. The days of handling things quietly were over. The decree mandated body cameras for every deputy with footage uploaded automatically to an outside server, where no one in the department could quietly erase it. All uses of force, all citizen complaints, and every arrest involving a minority suspect would face independent scrutiny. A civilian review board with subpoena power would be created, empowered to drag documents into the light and recommend discipline or termination. Internal affairs would be rebuilt from scratch with outside trained investigators. The old system was being dismantled piece by piece, but tearing down a corrupt structure doesn't instantly repair what it damaged. Judge Marquez, the same judge who had dismissed the charges against Naomi, ordered a full re-examination of every conviction that leaned heavily on Carver's testimony. The results were staggering. 41 cases triggered red flags, 23 convictions were vacated outright, declared too tainted to stand. 11 people were physically released from prison, some that very weak. 11 human beings walked through gates they should never have entered. Time served ranged from 14 months to almost 5 years. One man had lost nearly half a decade to a lie. When he stepped beyond the prison fence in his wrinkled shirt, he collapsed to his knees and sobbed, the weight of lost time hitting all at once. His mother, who had taken long bus rides every month for 4.5 years to visit, stood over him crying too. I told them, she repeated through tears. I told them he was innocent. Nobody listened. Now, finally, people were listening. By March 2024, 6 months after Naomi had walked out of the county courthouse wearing those yellow FBI letters, Luke Carver walked into a different courtroom entirely. This time he wore a suit instead of a uniform and sat at the defense table, the nameplate in front of him reading Defendant. The federal trial lasted 5 days. The government's case was relentless. Prosecutors played Naomi's recording again, breaking it down frame by frame for the jury. They showed how her car had been inspected in advance by federal technicians, verified clean. They showed Carver's hand movements in slow motion, the bag appearing exactly when he reached under the seat after reaching into his pocket. They put Deputy Jenna Cole on the stand. For nearly 2 hours, she recounted traffic stop after traffic stop, detailing how he ordered cameras turned off, how he coached her on what to write, how he joked about knowing which drivers would stick. Next came the data, the spreadsheets that turned stories into undeniable trends. 71 Black or Latino defendants out of 89 drug arrests, a conviction rate off the charts, a near-perfect correlation between missing body cam footage and contested arrests. It stopped looking like bad luck and started looking like design. Then the prosecution called the people behind those case numbers. One by one, they walked to the stand and talked about jobs lost, homes gone, families fractured, and years spent carrying a label they never deserved. Carver's attorney tried to frame him as a tough but dedicated cop targeted by overzealous federal investigators. He suggested glitches in the video, bias in the statistics, enemies out to get a high performer. But every time he pointed to shadows, the prosecution turned up the lights. The jurors had seen too much. When the defense rested, their story sounded thin compared to the mountain of evidence stacked on the other side of the courtroom. And then, finally, the government called Naomi. Special Agent Naomi Elise Carter took the stand in a dark blazer, bureau ID clipped to her belt. The prosecutor asked the question everyone was thinking. Agent Carter, when Sergeant Carver arrested you that night, you could have flashed your credentials immediately. You could have ended the operation right there. Why didn't you? Naomi looked at the jurors, then at Carver, then back. Because it wasn't about me, she said clearly. My job wasn't to protect myself. It was to protect whoever came next. If I'd shown my ID on that roadside, he would have panicked, apologized, claimed confusion, she continued. The department would have circled wagons. Maybe I'd file a complaint. Maybe some memo gets written. But nothing changes. The people he'd already hurt would still carry records. The people he'd target next would still be alone. She paused. I needed him to do what he always does. I needed him to lie on the stand in front of a jury. I needed the system to hear itself. Carver stared down at the defense table, his jaw locked so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. He couldn't look at her. The jury watched that too. After closing arguments, they filed into the deliberation room. It took 4 hours. In a case that complicated, 4 hours is fast. And when they returned, the foreperson stood, verdict sheet in hand. On each count, civil rights violations, perjury, obstruction, evidence tampering, the answer was the same. Guilty. Carver's shoulders sagged as the words landed. 2 weeks later, he stood once more before a judge, this time for sentencing. The federal judge, robes heavy, looked down at him. Mr. Carver, she said, you were sworn to protect and serve your community. Instead, you used your badge as a weapon. You planted evidence, lied under oath, and shattered lives. You did this in the name of the law. She paused, letting each phrase sink in. The damage cannot be undone, but consequences are required. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, she said. without the possibility of early release, followed by supervised probation. 12 years. Not a lifetime, but long enough to taste what he had handed out so casually. Behind him, a row of people he had wrongfully arrested sat watching. Some wiped tears, some nodded grimly. Some just stared, trying to decide whether this really counted as justice or just the closest thing they were going to get. Naomi was there too, seated quietly in the last row. When the sentence came down, she didn't cheer, didn't smirk, didn't look satisfied. She simply closed the small notebook where she'd been jotting details, rose, and slipped out the back. Work like hers didn't end because one man went to prison. There were other counties, other names, other patterns waiting. Carver's fall was a milestone, not a finish line. Outside, the sky looked exactly the same as it had the day he arrested her. Back in Millstone County, visible changes took shape. A new sheriff, someone from outside the old inner circle, was elected. Training shifted from how to control a scene to how to de-escalate one. Every patrol car carried a camera with footage streaming to independent servers. Deputies no longer had the power to quietly lose recordings. Each complaint from a citizen triggered a digital trail impossible to erase. The Civilian Oversight Board began meeting monthly, poring over files with fresh, skeptical eyes. The department that once protected Luke Carver was gone, at least on paper. But the scars remained. 23 overturned convictions, 11 people walking free. A county-funded restitution program started sending checks, though everyone knew dollar amounts could never match years stolen. One man who'd had his name cleared finally finished a college degree he'd abandoned 15 years earlier when he got locked up. He mailed his diploma to his mother first, then framed a copy on his wall next to his exoneration papers. Another person, once labeled a felon, now officially innocent, reconnected with children she hadn't seen outside prison, visiting rooms in 8 years. They were teenagers now, taller than she remembered, cautious at first. Rebuilding wasn't instant. Trust doesn't regrow overnight. But they sat together on a worn couch, telling stories and watching old cartoons, starting from whatever pieces they could salvage. A third person opened a small barbershop downtown. On one wall, right above the mirrors, he hung his exoneration notice in a black frame. "I put it where people can't miss it," he told a local reporter. "So nobody forgets this happened, so folks know the difference between being guilty and being labeled guilty." Special Agent Carter's career moved forward too. She was promoted to Supervisory Special Agent and given a broader mandate in the Civil Rights Division. More staff, more cases, more responsibility. When journalists tried to make the story about her, she redirected the focus back to the people who'd sat in holding cells because of one man's lies. I think about them," she said in one televised interview. "The ones who didn't have cameras, the ones who tried to complain and got stamped unfounded, the ones who never got this kind of review because nobody with authority was watching at the right moment." She shook her head. "They're the reason we keep going. This job isn't about catching one bad officer. It's about changing the systems that let bad officers operate for 15 years without consequences." If you drive down County Road 9 today, it doesn't look like a crime scene or a turning point into history. It's just a long, quiet stretch of asphalt running between fields and fence lines, dotted with mailboxes and the occasional farmhouse. Sunset still lay orange streaks across it. Kids still ride in back seats and ask how much longer. But somewhere along that road, a man with a badge once decided He could rewrite reality, and no one would ever prove otherwise. He believed the system would always back him, that reports and statistics and race would keep him safe from scrutiny. For a long time, he was right. Then one night, he pulled over the wrong woman, or the right one, depending on how you see it. A woman wired with hidden cameras, backed by analysts 1,000 miles away, and determined to sit quietly in chains if that's what it took to expose the truth. His confidence met her patience. Only one survived. Across the United States, traffic stops remain one of the most common ways ordinary people meet law enforcement. Studies have shown again and again that black drivers are pulled over at higher rates and searched more often, even when officers find nothing. Most of those encounters never make the news. No cameras, no viral clips, just a memory that sticks in someone's chest years later. A moment when they realized how fragile their safety really was. Change doesn't come from denial. Change begins when someone records reports and refuses to accept "that's just how it is" as an answer. It grows when data backs up what marginalized communities have been saying for generations. It accelerates when insiders finally break their silence, when someone like Jenna decides the risk of telling the truth beats the guilt of staying quiet. And sometimes it takes one case, like Naomi's, a case with video, documents, and a federal badge, to force everyone else to look harder at what's been hiding in plain sight. Have you ever watched something wrong unfold right in front of you and felt your throat close around the words you wanted to say? Maybe it was a cop crossing a line. Maybe a boss abusing power. Maybe a stranger being treated like a problem instead of a person. It's easy to tell yourself it's not your business, that someone else will step up. But what if there is no someone else? What if the evidence only exists if you're the one who gathers it? Stories like this don't exist to make you hopeless. They exist to prove that even deeply rooted systems can be challenged when truth is documented, preserved, and brought into the open. They show that one camera, one file, one person willing to sit through months in a cell to make a case, airtight, can crack open things that once looked unbreakable. Justice doesn't show up because it's invited. It shows up because enough people refuse to stop pushing. He said, if this story hits something inside you, if it made you angry or sad or suddenly very awake, don't let that feeling fade as soon as the screen goes dark. Ask yourself what justice looks like where you live. Who gets believed when they say they were wronged? Whose complaints get buried? Who always seems to get the benefit of the doubt? The answers to those questions are the roadmap to what needs changing next in your town, your county, your state. Talk about it. Ask hard questions at community meetings. Support organizations that help people document police encounters and navigate the courts. Learn what your local policies are on body cameras, traffic stops, and complaint reviews, and push back when the answers aren't good enough. You don't need a federal badge to make things safer and more fair. Sometimes you just need a phone, a pen, and the stubborn belief that the truth deserves to be seen, not buried. And if you've ever felt powerless while watching something unjust, remember this: evidence is power. Documentation is power. Solidarity is power. Naomi didn't win because she shouted the loudest. She won because her team collected proof that couldn't be brushed aside. The more we build cultures where people record, report, and stand together, the harder it becomes for anyone to rewrite reality with a few lines in a police report or a smooth lie on the stand. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that the truth can still cut through noise and fear. Drop a comment with your thoughts. What does real accountability look like where you live? What would it take for you to feel safe during a traffic stop or confident that a complaint would be taken seriously? These aren't just rhetorical questions. They're the starting point of change. Don't keep them in your head. Put them out into the world. Thank you for staying with this story to the end. Thank you for being willing to really look at how power can be twisted and how it can be challenged. If you want to hear more stories that pull back the curtain on what's happening behind official statements and polished reports, make sure you stick around, speak up, and stay curious. Because the more we pay attention, the harder it becomes for anyone to say, "No one knew." Thanks for watching, for listening, and for refusing to look away. After all these years, many of you know what Naomi's story proves in your bones. First, justice is never automatic. One lie from a man in uniform can turn an ordinary drive home into a nightmare, which is why evidence, a camera, a note, a witness, matters so deeply. Second, change takes courage joined with community. Naomi, the honest deputy, the exhausted public defender, and the freed neighbors all showed that silence only protects the bully, never the victim. Third, real reform is slow but possible. Policies, cameras, and oversight can't give back stolen years, yet they can protect your children and grandchildren from living the same old heartbreak. Friends, if Naomi's journey stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your voice. Have you ever watched someone in power twist the truth or felt that tight fear during a traffic stop you knew you didn't deserve? What would real safety and fairness look like for you, your kids, or your grandkids? Please share your stories and thoughts in the comments. Your experience might give strength to someone else. And if this message spoke to you, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for more true, eye-opening stories.